Okay, maybe let's start the session and don't let the people joining us online wait for much longer. My name is Matthias Poser. I work at the GIZ Financial Systems Development Department, and I am happy to moderate our great panel on financial inclusion of FDPs and talk about some practical experiences. I'm very excited for this topic in particular because I think talking about practical experiences always has a lot of meat on the bone, and at least I always feel like talking about practical experiences, you get kind of an aha moment. And we have a great panel today with 5 panelists. One panelist is joining online, and I'm very excited to see how many of these aha moments we are going to get today. When I was asked to moderate the session, I thought I'm going to start with some basic information about the situation of FDPs. Now that I was here for 2 days and that we just had a session on financial inclusion of FDPs and the great introduction by UNHCR, I might tone down the information part. I'm not going to tell you that this is still a increasingly global issue, that it's accelerated by disaster, by conflict, and by prosecution, and that of course the climate crisis is a great accelerator for it. And I'm also not going to tell you, because you all know that we had an all-time high at Forcibly Displaced people worldwide with more than 110 people. What I am going to tell you, though, is that we as GIZ have many projects in the world working on the financial inclusion of forcibly displaced people, and that we also advise the German government on this topic. And before we talk about these practical experience now with our panelists, I would like to start with a small anecdote from a couple of years ago from my personal experience where I had a great aha moment. A few years ago, I worked in Jordan on financial inclusion of refugees, and we were rolling out or supported the rolling out of mobile money for this target group. And we did focus group discussions in order to understand why or why not people use the mobile money that have received basic financial literacy training and trainings on how to use the mobile wallet. So we visited Haya, and Haya was a middle-aged Syrian woman living on the outskirts of Amman, the capital, and had a small business with her husband and her 3 children, making prayer carpets. And we visited her home, like a 3-room apartment. The production shop was set up in the living room, one wall full of different fabric to use. And we asked her, do you use the mobile money? And if so, do you like it? And she said she uses the mobile money, the mobile wallet, and she loves it. And I don't know about you, but usually when you talk about the people that just have been introduced to a new digital service, the response is not always like full out positive. So we were interested, and we asked her, of course, why. And she said, well, she can grow her business with it. She can reach customers outside of the community. She can receive payments and send payments all over the country, and she can just grew her business even to a degree that she hired a neighbor to support them. And we thought, yeah, that's interesting, that's positive. But we also thought, okay, that kind of were our assumptions. So nice, positive, but nothing making us aha. So we drive back to the office, and arriving there, a colleague that joined us, a Jordanian colleague, came to me and said, Matthias, Haya, after we talked, she came to me and said, there's another reason why I really like the mobile wallet. But I didn't want to say it in front of everybody. Partly, I guess, because I was in the room, and lesson learned, maybe don't be a male talking in this situation or being part of it. And she said the reason why she really, really likes using mobile money is because she does not have to discuss money issues with strange men outside of her family anymore when she wants to cash a check at the bank, or when she goes to a retailer to buy some fabric. And it took me a second, but then I thought, yes, this is an insight that we can work with. Of course, thinking about the social norms environment she's in, she does not want to interact with men who ask her, what's your business? Why do you have that money? And we thought this is a great insight that we can work with. And so based out of this insight, we started an initiative where we started training female agents, worked with the private sector to get these female agents on board with the payment service providers, so that when higher female refugees or women must interact with a financial service provider or a payment service provider, they can do so with a female peer. And for me, that was a great moment that sometimes seems to be easy talking about out loud, but hasn't crossed my mind before. And this showed me financial inclusion of refugees on the one side has a great economic potential. She grew her business, but on the other side, it showed that in order to have a service that is really used by this target group, you have to really tailor-made this service to the people. And this also means, and I want to emphasize this, that talking about displaced people or talking about refugees, this is not, and we have this heard earlier in the panel, it's not a homogeneous group. We're talking about educated and non-educated people, tech-savvy people, technical literate people. We're talking about young people, old people. We're talking about male and female, and this needs to be considered introducing a service you want them to use and financially include them. Yeah, so I hope this showed a little complexity, and that was only on a service level, not even talking about regulatory issues. And with this, I would like to move on to our great panel and introduce them to you. I would like to start with Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a livelihood technical advisor for the Economic Recovery and Development Unit and the International Rescue Committee based in Kenya, Nairobi. And she provides support to the design, quality implementation, and monitoring and elevation of programs across all the country. We're happy to have Yousra here, a financial inclusion expert at the ILO's social finance program in Geneva, and she spearheads the ILO's global program on financial education and drives initiatives to enhance financial inclusion for migrant workers, refugees, and those in fragile settings. We have Kristina Maslauskaite, technical advisor at the Microfinance for Microfinance at the Council of Europe Development Bank. And we have Mathew Downer, Senior Insights Manager with GMA's Mobile for Humanitarian Innovation team, which aims to accelerate the delivery and impact of safe, efficient, and dignified digital humanitarian assistance. And last but not least, online we have Kasia Hanula-Bobbitt. She is a board member of the Financial Inclusion Europe, a network committed to solving the problems of financial exclusion and serving the most underrepresented groups. I am very happy to have you all here and excited to hear your experiences. We have heard this we have seen the stages, and that's what we thought would be a good idea to approach our practical experiences from a refugee phase in a new country. We have at the beginning the arrival, survival stage, and then we move on to making a livelihood. And starting with the very beginning arrival stage, where it's all about existential needs. Maybe Elizabeth, from your experience, what does your organization, what are you doing in order to promote financial inclusion of FDPs in this situation?
Thank you. Great question. With the International Rescue Committee, probably just to tell you a bit, we work with the forcibly displaced populations across the globe. We are in over 42 countries responding to different needs. Now, narrowing down to specifically the question on what do we do when people are in emergencies? When conflict strikes, the first thing people do is to find where they can find safe space. And so once they're in the safe space, then the next thing is the food, the stomach still needs food, people still need clothing. And so that is a level where they are in emergencies. And for the International Rescue Committee, one of the key things for us to do is to make sure that they're in safe spaces. And apart from being in safe spaces, they have the power to access basic needs. And so through this, we respond through what we call cash and voucher assistance. The International Rescue Committee has a commitment globally to respond through cash and voucher assistance. 25% of our response should be through cash and voucher assistance. And so in so doing, we provide cash in envelope. We provide cash through mobile money transfers and other mechanisms through also financial institutions where the markets are functional, because in some instances, the markets are not functional and it takes time sometimes to reach out to like even financial institutions to be able to get into that agreement where we are able to meet the basic needs. But then what we do is immediate response, making sure that people have cash, multi-purpose cash, where they're able to access the basic needs. They're able to access food, they're able to access clothing, they're able to access other needs that are really, really very immediate. Sometimes even making sure that they just have a safe space to sleep or to spend the night. And so that is under temporary shelter. So at times, we do not do this ourselves. Sometimes if it's a very volatile situation, like when the war strikes, we also work through partners who are on ground, the local partners, to make sure that they are able to reach the population very fast. They understand the place, they understand the networks. And so we respond through networks to make sure that the response is as fast as possible and many lives are reached as much as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in these situations, fast response is very important. Mathew, how about you? What are your insights at this stage?
Great, thank you. And just very quickly, for those who don't know, as the GSMA is a global membership organization of mobile network operators, as well as their mobile financial services arms. And so a lot of the examples I'll bring today are what we've seen our members do in times of crisis. And I think Elizabeth's point about access to services is the most important question when we're talking about this very early stage. New displacement, new crises, new conflict, people on the move, and finding a way to access services. And here I think there's kind of two big access points if we're thinking about use of digital finance. And one is the legal access, the regulatory access, and the other is tangible. Can it come to me? And so I think there's two examples here that I'd like to talk about. One is flexible regulatory moving regulation during a crisis, getting exemptions. We saw, for example, during Cyclone Idai in Mozambique, many people displaced from their homes due to the storm, and our members saw that actually many of them had lost their identity documents, many had lost their phones, and they needed new mobile money wallets, new SIM cards quickly to receive assistance. And so through engagement with the regulator, our members got a 6-month waiver on ID requirements to ensure that people could, in the time of crisis, access the digital services that they desperately needed, enabling organizations like the IRC to transfer them cash and voucher assistance to their wallets quickly. But this also only works if in new locations you have network connectivity. Again, we're only going to be able to use digital financial services fast if connectivity is available and reliable. And here we've seen some really good partnerships between our members and humanitarian organizations to ensure that works. It can be as simple as a humanitarian organization saying, in this area you've already got covered, we expect the new population density to be here. And so you can reconfigure existing cell sites to ensure that the network is stronger in that area. Or if we're seeing new displacement into areas that weren't previously large population centers, they didn't have coverage, working to ensure that we get temporary cell sites in place, working to ensure that we bring already trained mobile money agents into areas so that markets can pop up at speed and ensure that newly displaced people are able to continue to access both the financial services, but also in a time of crisis, communication services, which we know are a huge source of psychosocial well-being for people going through crisis. And so partnering with those who have a mandate to respond to ensure that these services are always available or as quickly as possible available to the newly displaced is a huge part of what our industry is doing during these points.
Thank you. Yeah, and maybe we get into this later, but I heard also like very interesting anecdotes of like how you showed that putting the connectivity masts up, for example, is like showed that there's a great potential, and the partners who put it up, that it is profitable, even maybe more profitable than others, right?
I don't think at this stage of the displacement journey, but yes, definitely we have some good stories.
Katarzyna, how about you? Kristina, sorry. How about you and your perspective from within Europe?
Yes,
like,
so I come from the Council of Europe Development Bank, which is a bank that operates in Europe, in the European Union countries, as well as in larger Europe, in the Balkans, in Turkey. Ukraine has become the member as well. So we have a larger geographical European coverage. The bank was established 70 years ago as a bank for refugees to deal with the integration of refugees and migrants following the Second World War. So during the years, we have accumulated significant experience in the matter, especially, of course, during the crisis after the Yugoslavian, post-Yugoslavian conflicts, the 2015 refugee crisis, the recent crisis related to the war in Ukraine, as well as the earthquake in Turkey, for example. So there are many different spikes and the crises that follow each other and that have necessitated a lot of action on the side of our member states. Over 20 million of the 100 refugees are in Europe. And our countries, some of them are really struggling to provide all the essential support that is needed, especially in these initial stages. So we at the bank, because we do not only invest in financial inclusion and microfinance, but also in other sectors such as healthcare, education, social housing. This allows us to support our member states with very fast financing, both in terms of loans and grant financing. So, for example, building a hospital on the Turkish-Syrian border for the refugees, or increasing the reception capacity of the Balkan countries along the Balkan route after the 2015 crisis, but also most recently work with the refugees in Ukraine. In terms of financial inclusion in Europe, financial service providers, especially the microfinance sector, is a bit less relevant, I feel, in these initial stages, because most of our MFIs are not deposit, are only credit institutions, so they can only provide credit. And of course, these services come at later stages, and so we work more with them at these later stages of integration that I can talk about more later on. But in these initial stages, it's mostly the states and the local NGOs that take the responsibility of providing the very fast services, and we are supporting them the best we can.
Thank you. Maybe one follow-up question: how do you deal with what is the situation about the challenge we had also earlier, identification of the refugees or the people that come to Europe. How does the European institutions and regulatory bodies deal with that?
So this is a good question, and this is something that was not maybe talked about a lot in the previous session. Is that the FDPs are very heterogeneous group of people, right? And when we look at the FDPs in Europe, we see, for example, Ukrainian population that was displaced but has the right to work, the right to start a business, the right to live and access services. So obviously they require different types of support than other refugees that come with no rights, with no papers, and have to go through reception centers where they spend years, months and years sometimes to get the decision and the status. And then sometimes they're also displaced to another member state following that decision. So it's a very, of course, different type of situation. Two other things that are important are, of course, the language and the networks, the local networks. For the Ukrainian refugees that stay in the Eastern Europe and can get around in Russian, is much easier to start even from the day one, getting a job and starting a life. Same, for example, with the French-speaking refugees coming from African countries, for example, if they come to France. So there are all these different aspects that require different solutions. But with Ukrainian refugees, it's easy because they got all the rights from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for the rest, we have to go through the reception centers and want more difficult procedures.
Great, thank you. And I was told I was always supposed to give a little bit hint that we now bring in our dear colleague who joins online, Kasia. She was supposed to be here, but unfortunately she couldn't make it, but happy to have you online. From your perspective, also European perspective, at the early arrival stage, what are you working on and what are your practical experiences at this point?
Thank you very much for having me online. I know that I'm like very big on the screen right now, so it's a little bit intimidating to be like Godzilla in the room, but very happy that the technology is right now allowing for that. So I'm with Microfinance Center, which is the organization representing MFIs and social finance providers and investors that it's located in Warsaw, but it's a regional organization. We have 130 plus members. And for us, it was really interesting because we are MFI. So of course we are not in the first phase, right? We are not really supporting the newly arrival of refugees and forcibly displaced people. We rather are engaged in the phase 2 and phase 3. And maybe what is interesting, I will tell a little bit about the project that we are doing for Ukrainian women, which is the business development service. So we also we started doing this project because we thought that it is going to be an interesting and very needed way to kind of provide a financial independence and socioeconomic outreach to women who entered Poland and they need something, because what Kristina already said, there was really not they had the right to work from basically the get-go the moment they enter the country because of the temporary protection directive. They also had good language skills because Polish and Ukrainian, Russian and Polish are still the same language groups. So there was this possibility. And then also this is the closest neighbors that Poland had. So we had before the economic migration from Ukraine. So the Polish society was also very much aware of the different things, and that came up really clearly from the survey so the project that we designed was in the 3 stages. It was the skills training, the online platform, and also we trying to work on the policy level. So as I said, the phase 2 and 3, which not the direct first needs covering of the Ukrainian women who entered. But what came was from the survey and the project that we are doing is that there is a really need not so much on the demand side, so not the language needs on the financial literacy or the market access, because it seems to be that for everybody who wanted to open business, they kind of could get around with the information that they gather online. But what they didn't have, it's the finance. They needed also understand a little bit better the regulatory barriers and what's actually it's to do business in Poland. And there was really limited access to the mentor networks and to the business networks. So that's what we are trying to provide with the program that we are currently managing. And it was for us a very interesting, because that was the first program that us as something which is the regional association, we looked also on the practicality. And I think that was already mentioned that if we're doing something, we need to look at the needs of the people that are arriving, because the needs are very different, right? And with Ukrainians, the Ukrainian women, we know right now by assessing their, because we ran several surveys, we're trying to gather the cases of what would be needed for them. And we're trying to build on that. So maybe I stop here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it seems like the golden thread seems to be at the early stages, double F, you need to be fast and you need to be flexible for the regulatory body. Yousra, we talked and you told me, let's talk about the later stages. That's where ILO is mostly working in. So moving on, the refugees have moved on to, or the FDPs, to a stage where the basic needs are kind of met. And now we want to build livelihood. What is ILO? What are you doing to support that?
So I think I'll start. You started with an anecdote. I'll also start with one. So I have ILO and UNHCR, we have started our collaboration way back, perhaps 12 years ago or 10 years ago, where it was more and more evident that the humanitarian aid was shrinking and that the situation of refugees was being more and more protracted. So it is not anymore people coming in for 1-2 years and going back to their homes, but these are refugees that are staying, that are having children, that are having livelihood, contributing to the economies, and their children are even having children. So for my first joint mission with UNHCR, I was in Senegal, and it was my very first encounter with the refugee world. And there's this Mauritanian old man, 55 years old. He is a carpenter, and he was working. He has his workshop. I was surprised by the enterprise, by the workshop he has. He was employing 2-3 people. And then I asked him, how many years have you been here? I was expecting him to tell me 1-2 years. He was there for 25 years. So of course, there's no, and I think someone said it in the initial, in the plenary, no one would like to stay on humanitarian aid for that long. So it is really a question, not only that the humanitarian aid is shrinking, but it is really a question of dignity, of self-fulfillment, and of also being able to provide for yourself and your family. So this was really my first realization of this protracted situation of refugees that is happening more and more. And then we have also discussed about the humanitarian development peace nexus, and the fact that before, when you say the word refugees or displacement, you would think, of course, first one is UNHCR. Then you would think about NGOs that are providing relief, like IRC or others that are providing relief at the onset. Now, more and more, you see GSMA, you see banks, you see other international organizations that are active in the development space. All of this because of this protracted situation of refugees and of the fact that refugees, forcibly displaced populations and people are part more and more of the host communities and of the host countries where they are. They contribute to the economic well-being and to the GDP of the countries. And there are studies that also show that migration in general, but also the part of the refugee crisis. The refugees are providing also economic well-being to the countries. So this being said, so what do we do as ILO, and how do we act on this provision and promotion of livelihood and of economic integration of refugees and forcibly displaced population into the host countries? Being the International Labour Organization, of course, labor is a big part of what we do, is the only part actually, is why we are here. And when we talk about employment for refugees, it is either the wage employment or the entrepreneurship and the entrepreneurial path. So I come from the social finance program where we work on financial inclusion. So when we think and talk about the first part, that is wage employment, what the ILO does is creation. So, for example, the advocacy for the right to work, but also the preparation and recognition of prior skills, so that refugees, when they come to the countries, whatever they have done before is recognized, but also additional skills. So, if you come in and you want to be a carpenter, like the Mauritanian guy, then there are possibilities, and the ILO works with the governments of the host countries so that these refugees are also included in the educational and vocational training system of the countries so that they can build their skills. After this, they can either go to the employment path and they get employed, or they go through the entrepreneurship path. If they go to the entrepreneurship path, this is where access to finance, access to loans, access to payments kicks in. And what we have been doing is that we have developed an intervention model that works both at the macro level, so with the regulators, really advocating for, together with them, and we were talking about coordination and partnership, together with the different partners at the international and at the national level, so that refugees are integrated and recognized, that the UNHCR card is recognized as an identity card for the know your business, your client processes of the banks. And we also work at the demand and at the supply side. So at the demand side, so these are forcibly displaced population and hosts that want to access finance. We work together with our partners in providing entrepreneurial training for them. So they are coming from the vocational trainings, they come with their own knowledge, they want to create an enterprise. So we either provide them with entrepreneurship training so that they can start, or we build or we strengthen their entrepreneurial skills so that they can continue and grow their businesses. We also provide them with financial education. And you have been talking about this localization and these social norms. And we have, an international program in financial education at the ILO. And since 3-4 years, where we deepened our work on refugees, we have a specific track that is financial education for refugees, where for each country where we are working, we really go and deepen into these social norms and the financial habits and the needs and what is available and what is not, and how can refugees can go around, of course, including all of the digital payments and the wallets that can or cannot be sometimes available for refugees. On the supply side, so we work with microfinance institutions, banks, financial cooperatives, so that they can provide financial services to refugees. Financial services, of course, as was said, it's not only loans, but can be savings, payment services, and insurance. The easiest, of course, is savings, but what they need, if we are talking the entrepreneurial space, is payment and loans. And if you have been here in the plenary, you probably have heard about this risk appreciation or over evaluation of risk of the FSPs, of the banks, of the financial cooperatives vis-a-vis the refugees. So what we do is that, so I'll give you the example of Kenya, where we have joined forces with the UNHCR and the microfinance network, AMFI, of the Kenyan MFIs. And we have invited all the stakeholders of the financial sector to come and meet refugees. So we have organized, so UNHCR have organized these group discussions where I think we had around 10 refugees, entrepreneurs coming in and talking to everyone. It was mind-blowing for all financial institutions. What was, so in French you say la cerise sur le gâteau, so the cherry on the cake, is that we have taken all of these MFIs to these people that they have talked to their workspaces. And actually what was amazing, I have seen one of the institutions saying, this is amazing, you are a perfect client. Give me your business card, I'm going to call you and you come to me and I'm going to give you a loan on the spot. So this demystification of refugees and forcibly displaced people, and this information and showing to the financial service providers that actually they are, if segmented well, they're exactly the same risk profile as the host communities. So this was the beginning. We have taken them because with the project the ILO working in, so this was in the urban settings, we were working in the camps, and camps is a completely other, it's different setup, it's a different, the modalities and how a bank or a microfinance institution can work is quite different. So we have also taken the same group to visit Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps. After that, we've taken them through a full set of capacity building paths, starting with a training called Making Finance Work for Refugees, where we show them or help them, give them the tools to be able to understand this market and to design the right products for this market. Training is not sufficient, we realized. We complemented it with technical assistance when we have consultants being hand in hand with the institutions in market research. So we have a training on specifically market research, 5 days in the camps together with the institutions, looking, asking questions, doing a proper market research, focus group discussion, household mapping, financial services mapping, key informant interviews, all of the qualitative and quantitative tools that usually the financial institution do in order to identify a market. And out of that, we come back and they come up with ideas and with what products they have seen that are ready or that needs tweaking or that they need to create something completely different. And then we come up with additional TA in case they needed, from the institutional perspective, more assistance. For example, we have one partner in Uganda. They realized that the value chain of maize is very attractive and active in the areas where refugees are concentrated. So they wanted to work specifically on this value chain and to provide value chain financing. They didn't have the capacity for that. So then this is what we will complement with them so that they can come up with this product and serve the refugees across the maize value chain. I think I'll stop here.
Thank you so much. And I'm very happy that you gave the financial service providers an aha moment, meeting the refugees and showing them that the risk is not as high as they usually think it is. Going on with Kristina.
Mm-hmm.
We are at the stage now where we're talking about livelihood in Europe. What are your experiences?
So this is our main field of action with microfinance. We at the CB, we mostly support entrepreneurial microfinance. We stay away from consumer credit. So one very interesting initiative I wanted to share with you is called the Partnerships and Financing for Migrant Inclusion. The fact is that the microfinance institutions alone can only do as much, and we all know that we need to bridge these different types of actors and to build ecosystems, but it's not always obvious to do. So this is the project that is financed by the European Commission and implemented by the CEB of several grants that were made available to microfinance institutions in different countries, in the Netherlands, Belgium, Italy. And these grants provide opportunities for MFIs to work together with municipalities, with the chambers of commerce, with NGOs, with various entrepreneurial organizations in the country or in the region, to really link the work they do for a specific group of third country nationals, as we have defined them. This is important because what Yousra said just before about showing these profiles to MFIs, this is another way of doing it, because the municipalities or the organizations that deal directly with the incoming FDPs locally know best these people and who of them would be best suited for entrepreneurial training to start with, and then eventually maybe to take on a credit and to create a business. So these grants really enable that common action on a very local level. It's implemented locally on a city level or a regional level. So this is one initiative that we have started last year, and it is bringing encouraging results. One interesting thing that the Dutch MFI has developed was, of course, there is the issue of language, and especially in countries like the Netherlands, right? Even though many people would speak English, but it doesn't mean that the FDPs would necessarily do. The MFI really wanted to make the case of providing trainings in Dutch. But what they have done is that they hired a language expert to design a training in a very simplified Dutch, so that it's really on the A2 level, for those who are familiar with the language gradations, and so that it is more accessible to people who have not necessarily been familiar with the language beforehand. So this is something that is important. And these grants are also important because they, once you have created this training, it remains there. Some of it is delivered digitally, some of it in person. So it will, the MFIs will be able to use it going forward as well. Another interesting thing, for example, a French MFI that designed a product that is more accessible to people, not necessarily FDPs, it could also be other people of migrant origin, so loans that are what they call interest-free, so that are more acceptable for somehow based on Islamic finance principles, but not exactly. They are just packaged in a way that they're presented as interest-free loans and become more accessible. Another initiative is a very important one, an example of how to bring the businesses from informal to formal sector. This is another very, very important topic in Europe, where, of course, if you're operating in an informal environment, you cannot access most of the social benefits and you're still marginalized. So the MFI would provide the first loan for a startup, which of course is or could be informal at that stage. But the follow-up loan could only be provided once the business is formalized, and there would be a training and mentorship to help do that. And maybe a last example I would like to share comes from our esteemed partner, which is called Partner in Bosnia, and Partner is here with us today. I was visiting the Bosnian countryside this summer, so this is outside of entrepreneurial path. Partner provides loans for housing improvement and energy efficiency. And I met a family of internally displaced people from, they were displaced in mid-90s following the massacre of Srebrenica. They were been going around, from temporary shelter to temporary shelter for several years. Once they could buy a very small house in the countryside in quite a bad condition, they settled there, and they have been taking out small loans from Partner for the past 10 years. I think they told me they have taken out all in all 12 loans or something like that, making these small investments in improving their housing condition, and building a new house. So the new house is almost finished as well. So it took them a long time, but they managed to do it. And so they managed to use this credit instrument as a savings instrument in the end. So they could really improve the living conditions for themselves and their children. So this was also a very nice example.
Great. And now they even have a great asset
Yes.
if they want to be entrepreneurial in the future. Mathew, what does GSMA do?
Yeah, so I think slightly different. So our work hasn't historically been around entrepreneurial finance, but very much thinking about sustainable, meaningful, dignified, and safe access at the individual level. Thinking about the period of people are settling. To come back on to the point you suggested earlier. So as I said at the start, in a recent displacement, we're probably seeing temporary cell sites, temporary connectivity. There's a piece of work to be done around the business case about the investment of our members in the infrastructure that's required to make that permanent. In some settings, we know that operators already know the business case. It's proven in many places. The point that Matthias was alluding to, we know in some markets, refugee serving cell sites are amongst the top 5 most profitable in the country. So some operators don't need help, and others we know ahead of the current conflict in Sudan, there was a lot of work being done by development organizations, primarily UNDP, to kind of de-risk initial investment into refugees serving assets just to demonstrate that there would be an ROI. I've seen personally a number of risk guarantee profiles across the world on this topic, and they've never seen an operator have to cash in on that risk guarantee. So we know that the case is there. I was going to talk about ID and KYC, but I think it's been mentioned a lot by almost everyone on this and the plenary, so I'll stay away. Just to say, the way we see it in less enabling environments, cross-sectoral advocacy can have huge success. We saw it in Uganda a few years ago. We were discussing earlier, I think, starting to see some real positive change in Kenya based on a lot of joint advocacy. And so I think cross-sectoral work on these topics is vital. And again, I was going to talk about skills, but people have talked about that a lot. But I think one thing just to build on top, I think if we're looking at individuals, the financial literacy isn't enough if you're bringing people online for the very first time. The ability to recognize scams, to avoid harm from the internet is a really important tool. So I think if you're looking at financial literacy training with groups who are less digitally literate, it's really important to combine the two. We've seen some really horrible examples of where people have been victims of harm, and we say digital harm, but digital harm manifests in people's day-to-day lives offline, and I think it's really important to bear in mind. But the area I think I would like to spend a bit more time is around, we've seen the value in agent networks of encouraging sustainable engagement with displaced communities, and in lots of ways. So considering how inclusive your network is, we did research with UNHCR and Safaricom in Nairobi a few years back, looking at the experience of refugees and host communities with visual and hearing impairments accessing mobile money. And one woman, a refugee from the DRC, was telling us that she very rarely used her wallet because she had to travel more than an hour to find someone who could communicate in her sign language about her financial services. And so thinking about who the customers are in their broader sense, coming back to this point on heterogeneity of FDPs, is really important. And then thinking about the quality of service, we've done a lot of work on training agent networks across the world on humanitarian code of conduct, protection, safeguarding escalation, ensuring that there's no skimming off the top of marginalized customers, all these kind of things that we hear all the time, and working to ensure that we recruit. So I think, building on a point from the plenary, recruiting refugees and FDPs into the agent networks where that's legally possible, to ensure that there's a big enough supply side network to meet demand, but also that people have someone they feel comfortable asking questions of. We've seen time and again, if you only have host community agents, whilst people will go there to transact, if they have a problem or they're not sure, they're much less likely to ask for help, as I think this sector and many has said for a long time on gender lines. You need female agents, you also need FDP agents in the network to ensure that the service is appropriate. And we've done some really great work recently supporting Grameen Foundation and MTN in Uganda to do that. So recruiting women and young people from the displaced communities and the host communities to ensure that there is a big enough network in Bidi and Rhino refugee camp in the north of Uganda, because we did an assessment with them and there was 1/10 of the number of agents that we would have thought necessary to serve the market. And so we filled it with agents that we knew would be best placed to serve those customers. yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah, oh, great. And it shows again the refugees, not a homogeneous group. There's another level of, you have people who are need hearing aids or are disabled in a visual way, and they need to be thought of as well. And the service need to be tailored to this too. Very insightful. Moving back online to our dear colleague Kasia, another European perspective at this stage. What can you tell us?
Yes, thank you. So indeed, from the European perspective, the project that Microfinance Center has been doing for the last 2 years look at where are the gaps, what are the good practices, and what could be or should be changed. So it was a very good realization that, for example, from the European Union level, there is a lot of initiatives that are being targeted towards the refugees and forcibly displaced population. However, there are also, as it's being designed on the very technocratic level, it is relevant to bring something that actually could be applicable, or some good examples from the from organization that are dealing with refugees on the day-to-day. So that's what we were trying to do with microfinance centers and our members, to showcase, first to map what practices are there to serve to financially include refugees, and then we look of what are their needs, because we also look at the entrepreneurial microfinance. So what is actually needed for them to start this livelihood phase and start providing for their family and be more self-sustained and integrated in the new countries that they are rebuilding their lives. So from us, it was interesting to find out that there is a lot of good practices that are being right now in the Western Europe, of the countries that have some experience with hosting refugees. So it's like France with ADI, which really develops, for example, loan officers to understand the clientele, to talk to them, to help them beyond what would be considered like a pure credit or loan giving service, into more of the business development service. The same with Permicro, they really look at what are the needs of the clients, because there is also limitation that sometimes you can get a loan for the entrepreneurial activities, but you need sometimes a loan for something that is life event, right? And this life event could be health related, education related, and the microfinance law is kind of prohibiting the MFIs of doing that. So for the last 2 years, we were trying to identify where maybe the challenges and gaps from the supply side and from the demand side, and what is also so we are right now finalizing this study that we co-written for EIB, that looks at the different financial instruments that are available under the MFF. So for those of you who are not, sorry, that's a Euro jargon. So this is the budget, the multi-annual budget that European Union has, to see how can they be used more in a better way to actually provide better solution for financial inclusion of refugees. And of course, there are certain things that already has been mentioned, that the refugees are considered a riskier group, and several institutions trying to address that. However, if we're looking from the MFI side, indeed it is considered this stakeholder as a riskier stakeholder. So therefore, we are also considering what could be the solution to kind of lower the perception of risk. And another thing that I think is really relevant is the business development services. It's something that I think a lot of my co-panelists has been already talking about, that there is really the need to help to start the business. There is a need to build better understanding, the language practices, to have more of this acknowledgement of what the cultural situation in the country is. But the business development services are right now not funded in any way. So MFIs are relying a lot on the volunteers or people who can provide those services, but in my view, and I think that is also one of the recommendations from the study, it needs to be more systematic. So it needs to be something that if we really think about that we want to support people to rebuild their livelihood, we really need to see what type of targeted services that could be provided. And from what we did, we mapped certain examples. I mentioned two, there are more. But we tried to make them from Microfinance Center more visible and use as a good case studies and case practices to develop the system that actually would work. So I'll stop here. I think it's my 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's really interesting to see that no matter what perspective, the issues seem to be similar. Last but not least, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Please tell us from your perspective at this stage, what are your insights?
I'll try to be brief because everyone else has mentioned, but then I will just say this is a stage that we consider, or a phase that we consider to be the early economic recovery. And so at this stage, we are looking at people have started to recover from shocks, they are stabilizing, and they need now to gain their footing. And so starting to create small groups, cohesion groups that enable them to stick together. For example, on early introduction of financial inclusion, then we use the group methodology, which is known as Village Savings and Loans Associations. They form small groups to inculcate the culture of saving, and they start to get small loans where they are starting to establish small businesses, or they are supporting each other in whatever way on financial needs. This helps them to move away from the negative coping strategies. So at this point also, many of them still need a lot of enablers to support them to move forward. And so support on documentation, a lot of advocacy work going into the different initiatives that they seek to undertake, like those who don't have documentation, because we are looking forward to the next phase. And so we are looking at what kind of documentation will be required, what kind of partnerships. And so as IRC, we start to establish partnerships with financial institutions, mostly the microfinance institutions, with anticipation of linkage at a later stage. And so I would say that at this stage, we do a lot of basic financial literacy. We have a number of curriculums we have developed internally. For example, we have one that is known as Learn to Earn, supporting clients gain the basic knowledge of basically what it says, learning to earn. How can they navigate the market? What information do they have? So a lot of information also coming to clients to enable them understand the context. The contexts are different. And so just enabling them to understand that. And also the language being a big barrier in some of the contexts. So we focus more on basic literacy and numeracy. For it is a protection issue also. So they are able to communicate even before they get into business. As we get to the point of numeracy levels, it's at the point, if they start businesses, they are able to understand the currency they are transacting in, be able to provide the right change to the people when they transact, and also understand the market and know where to purchase goods. So in so doing, we are laying the foundation for these clients to enable them understand the market first, even before they get to a level where they're saying, now I can be able to, borrow, or I can be able to access money from a financial institution and the like. And lastly, also working with the telecommunication companies, for example, Safaricom. Recently in Kenya, we have been able to strike a deal with Safaricom, or a partnership where they are registering SIM cards for refugees to be able to transact on their own, unlike where they are using the community phone with a lot of risks that come about when they are transacting using a community phone. We don't know whether that money will get to them, or even if the money gets to them, whether they will receive the full amount. So such things, and just being an enabler at that point. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Okay, putting it maybe very superficially together, it seems to me the start phase, you need to assist fast, and you have a flexible regulatory framework to really serve the basic needs immediately. And while you move on, the needs change from maybe simply access to receive payments to savings, loans, and how to serve this. I'm looking at you. I would like to use the last 10 minutes for questions from the audience, also if we have questions online. Anybody, any question for our great panels? Please.
Thank you. I am Armen Hakukan. I'm representing Genesian Foundation based in Armenia. So recently we had more than 100,000 forcibly displaced people from Azerbaijan that during the 2 days fled to Armenia. And now we have them, and the state helped them with the first aid. So the health issues, the educational issues are solved. Now, as a foundation, we are thinking of supporting these people to start their businesses, because they had in their hometowns their businesses, they were working, they were in good shape, so their families were doing well. Now, the biggest problem that we are facing for providing these people with access to financial services, not to finance, is the collateral. How is your experience in this? Because if not all, but most of the MFIs require collateral for providing these people with the finance, with the loans. What is the experience from your side, from your organization's part? Thank you. For the non-financial services, it's easy, so we can work them, train them, provide services and such things. But when things come to real money, it's a problem.
Thank you. Very relevant question. Is the question to anybody specifically, or
just who can answer that question?
Who wants to?
I can take that up from what we are doing at IRC. In East Africa, Kampala and Nairobi, we are testing some collateral with the financial institutions. What we have done is we have put a facility in place we call Loan Guarantee Fund. This is used by the forcibly displaced populations or refugees to access loans. It does not necessarily mean that they will default, but because the requirements by the financial institution is you must secure whatever you are taking in form of collateral. And so the first collateral is the group. It is the first guarantee, the group that they form, because they are putting together some savings, and those savings are transferred to the bank or to the financial institution. The second one is the loan guarantee, where it is risk sharing. Just in case there is default, then that money will be drawn from the loan guarantee facility to repay that loan. We are testing it out. So far, we have seen, like, over a period of 6 months, there's no default. It just means we are just doing a proof of concept that are refugees bankable? If they borrow, are they able to repay back without necessarily being seen as unbankable and being seen as a very high risk group? Yeah.
Does it answer your question?
Many MFIs that operate in Europe and in the Balkan countries use personal guarantee or another guarantor that personally guarantees the loan. And I invite you to speak to colleagues from Partner. Maybe they can also give more insights on how they work.
Another thing can also be if they have been able to bring with them from Azerbaijan their history of, if they have been in contact already and taking loans. This also can serve and can strengthen this individual case vis-a-vis the banks, showing that they have already been taking loans and they've been good payers. This usually also helps.
Thank you. Any other question? Don't be shy. Use the opportunity. We have online question? Are there online questions? Okay. Yes, please.
So my name is Lydia from Opportunity International. In the earlier session that we had, we understand that in some countries, there's a big issue with the regulator when it comes to the KYC requirement. I'm just wondering from the panelists, from your experience, are you also having challenges with the regulator when it comes to the KYC requirement? And how are you dealing with that to ensure that the refugees and have access to financial services?
Mm-hmm. Who would like to?
I'm happy to start. I mean, obviously, at all levels, KYC is a challenge in many jurisdictions. I mean, we heard from the AFI colleague to start with, which I kind of stayed away from in earlier remarks. As I said, I think for us, where it's restrictive or unclear, it's largely around joint advocacy, I think, different cases. So we've seen success where our members are making economic arguments and our humanitarian partners are making humanitarian arguments to the regulators. You can make the case from multiple angles. I think where there is political will, and I think this is the case, you have to realize sometimes the political will is always going to be against you and there is little to no chance of success, and it's thinking about what alternative services can be provided. Where there is political will, I think questions around alternative identity. So we've seen success where you can use existing humanitarian identity. So in Uganda, I think many of us will know about, there was a shift to accepting the use of the OPM attestation database. So essentially the list of registered refugees was allowed for mobile money registration. And we've seen other places where linkages to WFP programming, for example, has allowed for access to, sometimes restricted, so often it's tiered, but thinking about alternative identity documents that might be used in case. But again, it all boils back down to, is there political will to make a change?
So from the ILO side, so of course you look at the KYC from the regulatory perspective, and we try to advocate from the economic perspective. So involving the employers organization, who are really great advocates in the different countries where we work, of financial inclusion of refugees and economic inclusion in general. But there's also, depending on which financial institution is doing what. If we are working with MFIs, financial cooperatives, usually they are less regulated than the banks, and they are not regulated by the central bank. So that they can be somehow under the radar, and they can, even though regulation is not clear, they can still provide loans to refugees. There's also this issue of unclarity of regulation. I don't think I have ever seen that in the regulation it says clearly, don't lend to refugees. It usually doesn't say you can lend to refugees. And this, the banks and the financial service providers, they're extremely conservative in their interpretation of the rules and regulations. So sometimes it's not even changing the rule, it's just clarifying from the regulator the rule, saying that we haven't said that you cannot, so please go ahead. So it can also be a matter of clarifying.
Yeah, I think I would want to add just to what you have said. It's also an issue of assuming that financial institutions, all of them, understand who refugees are and what they identify themselves with. So as a humanitarian organization or as agencies working with refugees, we also play that role of ensuring that financial institutions understand the refugees that we are working with. And so the first introduction, the first phase is IRC, like, we are working with this population, we are introducing them to you because we know them, we understand the kind of documentation that they are working with. I know one of the major challenges for financial institutions would be like working with urban refugees. They are very mobile. How do we trace them? It's like they are not encamped in one point. And we are saying, we have worked with them, we have data about them, and we understand how they're operating in these neighborhoods. So also knowing your customer for financial institutions is a matter of us as agencies being able to introduce and making them understand. And I think for the institutions that we are working with the Yuga Fund Microfinance in Uganda and Equity Bank in Kenya. And for that level where we have been able to make clear the business case, then there have been no challenges.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And as we have seen yesterday at the award ceremony, to wrap it up, next year, the initiatives on this topic, financial inclusion of FDPs, will be celebrated. So I think this discussion will go on, and practical experience will move on, and we will have even more of this next year. So I would like to thank you for joining us. I would like to thank you for giving us your insights for the panel. And so please join me in saying thank you, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you for
Even
great
it's quite
moderation.
restrictive.
Yeah.
I was trying to